All right, thank you, Scott, and welcome everyone. My name is Brian Connor. I am the Director of JDE Security for ERP Suites, and today's webinar is Security as a Competitive Advantage. So let's get right into it. Let's start off with ERP Suites. What do we bring to the table as a consulting partner? What ERP Suites does is we help our customers realize IT. How do we do that? We have a suite of products. First one is Clarity, which is our synthetic monitoring and alerting to help the JD Edwards administrators out. A lot of great features in there. We have our Scannability, which is our orchestrator-based JDE barcode scanning solution. Uses infrastructure and licensing that you already have in place. No additional legacy application licensing is needed to run a very fast, modern barcode scanning solution. And we also have our mobility solutions, which is access to your JDE data and task management on your mobile devices, whether it is a iPhone, Android phone, tablets, anything of that nature. We support all of that. Outside of our application products, we are a cloud hosting partner. We have 2 data centers. We do hosting ourselves as well as public, private, and hybrid cloud solutions with AWS and OCI. We have a phenomenal managed services department, very experienced technical CNC staff, first-rate response times, very experienced and extremely capable CNC team to support all of your managed services needs for JD Edwards. We do managed security, so not just the JD Edwards security, but we also can help reinforce your network devices and ERP data. And JDE consulting. So we do installations, upgrades, tools releases, lift and shift, cloud migrations, anything of that nature. We have an extremely talented and well-versed group of technical consultants on that side. We do the CNC development and functional support across the consulting and managed services as well. One of the things that we do is we partner with industry leaders and we build relationships with them so that we can deliver best of breed solutions for your specific situation. So we've got a slide here with just a few of our partners. If you have need for any of these types of solutions, or just know that we partner with the best in the business when we are supporting you. This is just a small sample. We've helped over 300 companies that have trusted us to help them grow, anything from APR Energy all the way to Whites. A little bit more about our managed security. So we do a lot in the cybersecurity or infrastructure security space. We do threat-based managed security. We have endpoint protection, DDoS protection. We do DNS filtering and protection, as well as IDS and IPS firewall monitoring services, vulnerability-based managed security, site and infrastructure, disaster recovery, air-gapped disaster recovery solutions, a lot of great things there. All of that is built on having some good system hardening in place, some host-based, network-based. We've got a very, very capable and well-certified team on the back end, helping to make sure that the infrastructure is secure by default. When you do that, you've mitigated the vast majority of any of the vulnerability-based issues. So all of those things that you hear about in the news that people are scrambling to patch, we've already patched because we are secure by default. We help position customers for the future. In a recent webcast, Oracle shared this ERP progression. Technology is moving from the basics where we are or where we have been in the past, where your traditional ERP like a JD is a transactional based system, it's your system of record, and moving into a more automated type of a solution. So going from your traditional ERP, where we are now moving is into mobility, IoT, orchestration, a lot of collaboration, and moving from that into the next couple of phases here, which is going to be more of a supervised ERP, robotic process automation, voice assisted decision making happening in your systems. And finally, the last bit is autonomous ERP, using artificial intelligence and machine learning to help guide and assist or automate the decision making in your ERP system. ERP Suites is experienced in helping companies move from traditional ERP into a more autonomous ERP solution. All right, so that's the basis of ERP Suites. Let's get into the topic for today, which is security as a competitive advantage. Three main areas we're going to cover. First is, why does security fail? What are some of the common security issues and the impacts to your business? And then how can you turn that, how do you devise a solution to make security a competitive advantage for you? And what does that look like and how does that help? So why does security fail? Traditionally, security is not looked at until it's time to go live. Most implementations, upgrades, any sort of a migration, no thought has really gone into what security is actually needed and how it's going to be used. The business and implementation team are busy mapping business processes, making sure everything is set up to operate the way it's needed. And at this point, the technical and security teams are not involved. Um, Also, the business is not involved. Once you get to the point of realizing, hey, we're about to go live, we need some security, the technical team jumps on it and they go full bore in the last couple of weeks to try to do as much as they can. And the business, unfortunately, kind of gets left to the side while the security team does what they can to try to implement a security solution. What you end up with is locking down is the focus. The whole point that everybody's trying to do is saying we have to make sure that people don't do things they're not supposed to do. They slam in an all doors closed model, and it makes it very difficult and cumbersome, which usually ends up being rolled back because we can't quite get everything we need prior to go live. And so we end up with a patchwork of um, all doors open, all doors closed in order to try to get things working and allow the business to go live with the system. Last bit is, I call it technobabble. What we end up with is we have business, the tech team and the business team are speaking different languages. The tech team is focused on the security language, JDE technical information, while the business is focused on business processes, what they do day in and day out. Yes, both sides need to compromise a little bit, but the tech team, we need to stop trying to confuse and dazzle with all of the terms and technology that we throw around of what type of security, what the program IDs are, the forms, the versions, all this type of thing, and we need to make this a business conversation. Restriction is not the goal of security, access is. Once you get past the initial heartburn of a security implementation, unfortunately, it usually turns into heartburn, it gets put on the shelf. Security is implemented based on where the company is right now without regards to where the company is going to be going in the future. Because there's no plan, it becomes layer upon layer without any real cohesive guidance to it. When additional security is needed, it's generally handled as a one-off without regards to any previous standards. Becomes somewhat like an archaeological dig. You're uncovering layer upon layer and nobody really knows why it was done, when it was done. All we know is it works and everybody says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? We're afraid to change it because things are working today and the last time we tried to make a change, things didn't quite go so well. So the mantra is, don't change what's already there, just figure out how to give me what I need. Security it's not magic. A lot of the times people look at the security team, and the security team enjoys kind of being the Wizard of Oz, hiding behind the curtain, right? We need to stop hiding behind the curtain, and we need to engage with the business. We need to learn what the business is doing, why they're doing it, and how they're doing it. Build trust with the business so that when there is an issue, they're not afraid to come back to the technical team and engage because they know that we are going to work to resolve the issue. So what are some of the common security issues that I've seen in security over the last 15 years or so? So from a high level view, we see everything from strategy and design issues to not being aligned with JD Edwards, controls, being scalable, technical issues, and then trying to make it frictionless. So let's jump in with the strategy and design. So there needs to be a plan that is created by the business and IT and your audit team, whether it's you have a dedicated internal audit team or you work in conjunction with a couple of folks and an external auditor, but you need to have a plan that addresses what the business requirements are and how the IT team is going to approach solving them. It's a living document and it needs to be reviewed annually. So typically what I see in most customers where I go into is there is no strategy and design. Everything is done ad hoc. A request comes in, it's completed, and there's no thought to, does it fit with our overall design? Is this matching what we need to have done? What ends up happening is it becomes very confusing and very hard to manage. When you change security administrators, the new administrators don't really understand why anything was done previously. They have their own way of doing things, and it just adds another layer of complexity and confusion onto the whole mess. Controls. There needs to be a single place for making changes to everything security related in JDE, whether these are changing roles, what's on your E1 pages, having access to all of those, changing your task views or menus, menu filtering, all of these types of things. You end up with effectively you have too many cooks in the kitchen. You have people making changes to the same types of things in differing environments, and you get a lot of contention when things start to move forward. Compliance and critical access kind of gets thrown out the window. You have issues with privacy and data ownership concerns because things are being done differently in multiple different environments. So you need to understand who's responsible for making the changes and have a defined process flow for how those changes are going to be made. Next issue is scalable. We touched on it earlier, but in most instances with a system, you have a security model that is a point-in-time solution. It's unable to handle business changes. And those business changes can be acquisitions, divestitures, maybe it's a change from a centralized financial model to distributing the responsibility for purchasing from corporate to all of the remote offices, or I've seen more frequently, you have all of these functions that are done in multiple locations that come in-house to a shared service model. And so you need to be able to accommodate those changes and do it without significant amount of rework. If you have the right model and strategy in place, being able to make those changes becomes very, very quick and easy. The next challenge we have is being frictionless. Um, if you make it hard for the end users, they will find a way around it. It's just a simple path of least resistance model. If it becomes too difficult and they can't get answers and they can't get access, they'll find another way to get there without going through the security team. Complicated solutions lead to delays in requests. You end up granting too much access, um, and you end up with an increased risk of fraud. Um, I like to use the example for frictionless of Apple, whether you're an Apple user or an Android user. Um, Apple is the epitome of a frictionless experience. Anytime you have Apple devices, you need to add a new device in, whether it's an iPhone, iPad, um, home computers, anything. You turn it on, it connects, and everything just works seamlessly. It doesn't have to be a big production to get Apple devices to see, recognize, and work with each other. It just happens. That's the goal for your security model within JD Edwards, is you want it to be frictionless. When it's that easy, people come to you and they ask for help. And it's easy to provide that help. Nobody's trying to work around the system and find the back doors or get help outside or shadow IT to try to do things outside of the ERP system because they know it's just going to work. Technical challenges. Again, we can't change it because we don't know what is going to happen. Security is aggregated over time with different people taking different approaches to resolve ongoing issues. You end up with somewhat of a Frankenstein security model with your current admin unwilling or unable to do anything more than just keep patching things as they're not sure what the impact of a bigger change will be. They don't really have the time to dig into the issues, or they don't have access to the business resources to assist in understanding why things were done, or those business resources are no longer here. Nothing was really documented, and you just have what's there and you have to try to figure it out on your own. You end up with a lot of technical debt, and it's very hard to pay off that technical debt. One of the biggest issues is having conflicting security that causes a loss of access, causing, again, more heartache for the users that have to log in and log out with different roles applied in order to be able to just, for example, process a purchase order. That's partially due to not being aligned with JD Edwards. The JD Edwards security programs that were built and designed when One World first came out are very, very effective at doing what they need to do. We as security practitioners are not very good at leveraging how JD Edwards security has been built to streamline how it works. And we end up causing most of our own problems or shooting ourselves in the foot with this. We're not using best practices. We have conflicts between roles. We have conflicts between roles in our star public setting that's causing users to have to log in and log out. Administrators are left chasing issues. They're trying to resequence roles to get things to work for a user that's, for example, trying to get product on a truck to get shipped. Security is sometimes added at varying layers to counteract security that's applied at a lower sequence role. Eventually, with all of these band-aids on top of band-aids, you're going to cause performance issues and add to the layer of complexity. All of this excess security ends up in higher costs and performance issues for your system. All right, so how do we turn security into a competitive advantage for your company? How do you make it Apple-like for your system, for your implementation of JD Edwards? The first thing you need to understand is, and this is from the business side and probably more so from the technical side, is that security is a business issue with a technical solution. It's not a technical problem to solve. Security is there from the business perspective. We just have the technical team that are implementing what needs to be done to enable the business. Which brings up the point. Security is there to enable the business, not to impede it. The goal isn't to put roadblocks in front of the purchasing folks or the finance folks to keep them from doing things unless the business has decided that we don't want them to do it. Security is there to enable the business. So how do we get to that point? We have a security framework that we've defined here. So you start with a few high-level areas: strategy and design, compliance, security containers or business process-based roles, validate, test, and adjust the security that you've built. Once all of that's done, then you can start implementing security controls and automation. So let's look at strategy and design. So what is it? A document that you create working with the business and with your internal audit team to understand what they do and how they do it. What security is important to the business? If you're spending a lot of time trying to design a lot of row or data security and the business is saying, but everybody's going to be transacting against all business units and all companies, we don't need row security, then let's not put any effort into trying to secure something that doesn't need to be secured. Talk to the business and find out what are the current pain points. Where has security caused issues and why are people trying to go around it? So understand what those pain points are and make sure that we address them as part of this strategy. What are the business plans for the next 3 to 5 years? Is the company looking at doing acquisitions? Divestitures are probably not going to share that information too broadly, but what are the growth plans? Are they looking at buying companies? Are they looking at implementing additional modules? Generally speaking, those types of things are known well in advance. Account for those as part of your strategy. The strategy document also, it needs to be business focused with business terms. This is not a technical document. This is a business document that is guiding how things are going to be done to implement security in the ERP system. Once you have your strategy, you can develop the design. Again, this is all part of a couple of documents that are going to be the guiding principles for the company going forward. You take all of that information from the strategy and develop the strategy design document. You don't want to just document what the strategy is, what the decision points are, but what the reasons are behind it, so that when it's reviewed or looked at again, you understand we chose to do X because of certain business conditions or constraints. Whatever the case may be, you've documented the why behind it so that future people a year, 2, 5 years down the road understand, okay, we understand why they did it. So now we can understand if it still applies or if we need to change direction. It's used as a guide to design your security. It needs to be published. You include the strategy and design documents together. It's published where everybody can find it. If you create this wonderful document and then you just stick it in a filing cabinet somewhere and it never sees the light of day again, then when your next security administrator or IT manager director comes in and asks questions, nobody knows anything about why we're doing what we're doing. It needs to be out there, it needs to be published, and it needs to be reviewed and updated on a periodic basis. You need to be prepared to have conversations to explain what it is and why certain things have been done and be able to justify the various bits and pieces that have been documented in this. Part of this overarching strategy and design has to include compliance. Um, Controls are legally required for public companies, and they're good business practices for all companies. Separation of duties or SOX controls were legally mandated with the passage of the Sarbanes-Oxley legislation, but that's not where they started. Generally accepted accounting principles, best practices have been around as long as companies have had finance departments. So you need to understand what those controls are and incorporate them into the strategy and design of the security model. Utilize previous audits from external auditors to highlight where they're looking and where their focus is. There's going to be lots of issues that you're going to have in the company, um, but prioritize. You can't fix everything all at once. So fix the things that matter the most first, and then once those are done, you can move on to the next. But include all of that as part of your compliance portion of your strategy and design document. You do need to have separation of duties. It's good business practice. Um, Reduction of risk, reduction of fraud. Some controls are done via security access rights, so not being allowed access to post batches or to run sales update, for example. Some controls are done via business process setup, so batch approvals. So I can enter a, a journal entry, but somebody else has to review it before it can be posted. AP payee control. This is a great one, especially in today's climate where AP fraud is running rampant, where somebody calls up, submits a web form or some other type of thing to say, hey, we've been acquired, or we've changed our bank account number, and somebody changes that in the system. AP payee control means that when that's done, any payables are put on hold until that has been verified. We've got a great article out on our blog post that details this in a lot more detail. But again, some of these controls are done via security and some are done via business process. The payee control doesn't prevent AP fraud. It just adds another layer into the process to slow it down, to avoid that last minute urgent, hey, change the bank account right before you issue that $200,000 payment that you're never going to see again. Utilize both security as well as business processes to secure your system. Um, I'll make a shout out. We have Blueprint 4D coming up in May. Join Quest, go to the conferences to learn what the latest enhancements are. JDE, Oracle are constantly working on security within the Enterprise One product line. If you haven't evaluated the latest releases for new features, you're probably missing out on things that'll make your life easier and better. All right, security containers, or otherwise known as roles. Um, these are based on distinct business processes. So think of things in your environment that are very distinct, not a very broad uh, business process like order to cash, but looking at the individual pieces. So sales order entry, order approval, order releases, voucher entry, vendor setup, things like that. Each one of these are distinct business processes, and you want to create a role based on those business processes. If you think about it, how you're doing voucher entry today is the same as how you did it 10, 15 years ago. The business process doesn't change. So if you build your container, your role around something that's known, it becomes much easier to grant or revoke access based on a business process. Be careful or be sure to include all aspects of that business process in that role. So if you're doing sales order entry and you only give them access to the sales order entry initial screen without giving them access to the item lookup or the customer lookup, all of the ancillary pieces that go with it, it's not going to be useful to them. So it needs to include everything that's part of that distinct business process. So think of all the form and row exits or UBE interconnects that are attached to those screens. Sales order, purchase order, there can be quite a few of those. All of those need to be granted so that it's easy for the end user to do their job. You want to make sure that each container or role does not have any compliance issues. Again, you've already looked at and you understand and have prioritized what your compliance issues are. So make sure that you have a process to have these roles not have those things built in. At the end of the day, you are going to have users that have compliance issues. You're going to have a user that has voucher entry and payment approval. but this is going to be a very intentional granting of that access. You can mitigate it, you control it, and you know specifically who has it versus having it part of a role and having somebody grant the role without really understanding what they're granting. Again, we want to make it simple, but not simpler. Think Apple. It works. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to know everything that's under the covers for the voucher entry role. You just know I have a business process called voucher entry, and I need Bill to have access to it. Give him access, and he can start entering vouchers immediately. Once you've done all of that, you need to validate, test, and adjust. Your end users have to validate these security roles or containers. Use test scripts. If you don't have test scripts, take this opportunity to create them. If you do have a test script, use this opportunity to make sure they're up to date. When you find gaps in access, and you will, make the adjustments and retest to verify. Adaptability is critical here. Yes, you think you've gotten everything in there, but once a user starts going through the scripts and understands everything that needs to happen, again, as we said, you're going to find issues. Be adaptable and make sure you put the required access in the correct container. Validate and retest anything that changes. Don't make any assumptions. And once all the testing is done, have the users that performed the testing sign off on that testing. That puts a little bit of their skin in the game to say, yes, I tested everything and it works. I can do my job in production today with this set of access. Another note on the script-based testing. My experience is companies that have gone through a thorough UAT using test scripts have significantly fewer issues that go live than those that do not. Even within the same company, I had two divisions, one that used test scripts and one that did not. During the testing phase, the one that was not using test scripts reported very, very few issues versus the one that had test scripts reported lots of issues. We got them resolved, adjusted, everything fixed. Once we went live, it was reversed. The division that didn't use their test scripts had lots of issues, lots of production delays. It caused a lot of issues because they had signed off and said, absolutely everything works. The other team that had done thorough testing and went through that pain prior to go live was smooth. They didn't have any problems. They were able to get their jobs done very quickly and easily. On the assumption piece, just because you go into a program and you see the plus sign, don't assume that you have the ability to add. You need to go all the way through. Click the plus, enter the order all the way through to completion, issue the payment. Everything that needs to happen needs to be done all the way through end to end. Once you've done all of that, now you can go to the point of implementing controls and automation. You want to go through planned controls and automation only. Don't change the game plan now. You've got a strategy, you've put together a design, you've created the containers, you've tested them. You don't want to change and say, hey, we implemented, perhaps you bought a third-party security tool like All Out Security to assist in this implementation, and you notice that there's all these bells and whistles that comes with a product that you can automate a lot of things. You can control access to critical programs or critical roles with compliance and workflow and system documentation. But if you haven't already figured out how that's going to be used, you don't have it part of your strategy and design document, don't try to change the game now unless you go back to that strategy and design document and re-engage the business and audit and your IT teams and make sure that you've figured out exactly what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. There's some great tools out there that can make a lot of this very, very simple and easy and streamlined. but don't get all the way through a project and at the last minute decide you're going to change something, because that usually does not end very well for anybody. So security as your competitive advantage. What does it mean? It means that you're safe. You've mitigated your risks. You have your control and automated access in place, and you're protecting your sensitive information. You've decided exactly what is sensitive and what controls and everything that you need to do upfront. There's no accidental security. You're doing everything that the business and audit have said, this is what we need for our business. It's reliable. You're taking the guesswork out of your access changes. You've increased your system stability. You've reduced your time to respond for user requests. When Bill gets in and says, hey, so-and-so was out sick, I need to be able to do voucher entry, you can get that access done in seconds versus trying to figure out, what role do I need to give them? Is it going to conflict with any other roles? So you have a reliable, frictionless environment to be able to give users access that they need to. And you have a secure future. You have a model that is designed and built to scale with your company as you grow, whatever that may be. When you've done all of this, one of the beneficial side effects, aside from having a reliable and more stable system, is you can reduce your headcount dedicated to security. Doesn't mean you're getting rid of people. It means that they're able to focus on more strategic value add activities versus setting up a user and adding roles and adjusting security. You have your high value resources doing high value strategic activities for your business versus day-to-day administration. And that wraps that up. So Scott, we'll open it up for any questions.
Question. You still see a lot of companies running ADO?
Running ADO.
All
All
doors
doors open.
open.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Well, somewhat. What you'll see is they will say, technically, we're in a closed model because we have a star public, star all, but then 80% of our roles have undone that, and even though at the star public you're closed, vast majority of the roles are granting it back. So they like to think that they're all doors closed, but not quite. So unfortunately, yes, we're still seeing a fair amount of that. Usually the folks that are doing that are relying on things like menu filtering, saying, well, if they can't see it, they can't run it. And I think, as anybody who's been in security for a while knows, just because you can't see it doesn't mean you're secured from it.
Oh, thank you very much, Brian.
All
Good
right.
stuff.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you everyone for joining. And I hope to see you at Blueprint at the beginning of May.
Yep, sounds good. All right, bye. Thanks, everyone.